Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. Classes back in session today at Lane Tech College Prep. Mercury was found in a bathroom there last night while a girls' basketball game was going on. Mercury exposure can cause significant neurological symptoms. The school's principal says a hazardous materials cleanup will go on today and throughout the weekend. Mayoral candidate Jesus Chuy Garcia says he wants a new police superintendent and more neighborhood patrols. Garcia unveiled his public safety proposals at an event earlier this afternoon. He says he also wants to hire more police officers to fill out vacancies and says good cops deserve respect. Garcia is one of 9 candidates seeking the mayor's office, many of whom have called for the removal of current police superintendent David Brown. Governor J.B. Pritzker signs a new abortion bill into law. The bill would prevent any legal action from out of state against patients and providers of abortions in Illinois. It also prevents any out-of-state jurisdictions from taking legal action over gender-affirming care provided here.
Here in Illinois, we know that reproductive care is health care. A medical decision should be made between a patient and their health care provider. No one else.
And on to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Craig Dellamore of WBBM News Radio, Greg Hines of Crain's Chicago Business, our very own Amanda Vinicky of WTTW News, and Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune. First tonight, a tough week for the mayor. She owns up to a major mistake after her campaign emailed teachers to ask students to volunteer. She says the campaign worker responsible for that email will not be fired. Meanwhile, her opponents and the CPS watchdog pile on, and the ACLU says it's possible that First Amendment laws might have been broken here. Greg Hines, mea culpa from the mayor. Is that enough to make this whole thing go away?
No. The mayor would prefer, I mean, I'll take her at her word that she didn't know about it. Frankly, I believe it because I don't think she'd be that stupid to do something like this with the potential to blow it up. But Chicagoans are a cynical bunch when they come to politicians. They don't believe politicians to say, oh, golly gee, I didn't know that. And beyond that, there's a question of it happened twice. It also happened to Chicago City Colleges. And there's a third question, which is, did she set the culture in her campaign organization to allow people to think that you could do this kind of stuff? Lori Lightfoot got elected largely because of ethical issues. If you remember at the time, Mike Madigan was under fire, Eddie Burke was under fire. She was going to come up and clean the swamp.
Bring in the light was her whole motto.
This does not look like she brought in the light.
And it does appear that ethics laws were broken here, Craig Delmore. And just to remind everybody, I mean, it was an email sent from the campaign to teachers in their public accounts asking them to recruit students to volunteer to, quote, help her win. Do you think that ultimately they're going to have to pay a fine here?
They may have to pay a fine, but it doesn't appear that the effort by this, the person who's being blamed for this, the campaign staffer, was meant to intimidate. It's just that if your letter is coming from the campaign of the person who runs the school system, who is in charge of all the people who run the school system, it can certainly seem that way. It's sort of like with the sexual harassment laws. It's just the fact of your position. But I can only think, and I'm strongly with Greg on this, that and no one who is, frankly, an adult and has any experience in history would think that a letter to the CTU, which doesn't like Lori Lightfoot.
Right, these teachers are represented by the CTU. They have their own candidate for mayor, Brandon Johnson.
This was designed to blow up. Not intentionally, but there's no way this wasn't going to blow up in her face.
Even from a practical point of view, so outside of course, there are plenty of political considerations, ethical questions. In what campaign does a single staffer have the ability to send out an email without running it up the flagpole and getting checked? I mean, from just a sheer basis of practicality.
And saying there's class credit these students could receive.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, again, the questions really just pile on and on and on. But to me, it's at its most base. Who, in what professional campaign is that even tolerated? Or does somebody have the capability?
Ray Long, if this is found to be just a mistake, a boneheaded mistake by a low-level staffer, and nothing that had any kind of nefarious intent, does the mayor wash her hands of this, or do they still face ethics violations?
Well, I think she faces ethics violations, Paris, but I think one of the key things here is whether you can prove intent, that the person knew that, hey, this was a good idea, it doesn't matter what the laws are, something like that. That doesn't seem to be the case right now. But violation is a violation. You'll probably get slapped on the wrist. The problem is that everybody looks at things through a political lens in this town. And if you're working on the mayoral's campaign, why aren't you looking through that lens too?
Knowing who teachers are represented
Right.
by and the politics of that.
Not that it would have been okay, by the way, had it been another campaign.
But the point is the court of public opinion is different than the court, the real courts. Right. She may not have done nothing criminal may have occurred here, but that doesn't mean Chicagoans aren't going to shake their head and say, we don't like this.
But the coverage fine's not going to mean much to a campaign that has millions of dollars. They will, even if she gets fined, how many $1,000s,
right.
It's not.
It's the coverage that's been very damaging.
Exactly,
Greg Hines, the ACLU, is also talking about federal violations here. What are they referring to?
Well, what they're referring to is the suggestion that when a superior that runs your organization, when somebody working for them sends you a letter or an email, in this case, suggesting you do something, the implication is, gee, if I want to get promoted, if I want to get my raise, I ought to do it.
If you don't want to get fired.
Right. Whether or not there was real coercion is something that the courts and the lawyers will figure out, but it certainly raises that question, and just the raising of it is not good.
Craig Delamore, the mayor's campaign, if you look at polling, was facing an uphill battle even to get into a runoff. Does she recover from this?
I'm not sure that she will recover from it. The issue is how far down was she already? And this is going to, I don't think the damage goes away. There's not enough time for the damage. It's leaving a bad taste in everyone's mouth. And even she admitted when she talked to us yesterday that she said she's certainly not happy about this. She was asked if she thought this was going to be a lasting damage. And she said, I am not happy about how this went.
All right. And speaking of that, we do have some sound from the mayor yesterday. Let's roll that.
The outreach to the CPS teachers via their emails was a mistake, should not have happened, and is not going to happen again.
Ray Long, you've investigated things for a long time, especially in the realm of politics. What other questions do you want answered here?
Well, you gotta wonder who found out about it, why they didn't shut it down after the college issue earlier, which was very similar in the summer, and how that was allowed to go on. So you've got those important questions, but you got to also just line it up against what the law is and determine whether or not something was actually illegal, and then it gets into a whole new realm.
Yeah, and multiple probes now, the CPS Inspector General, the City Inspector General, the Ethics Board. We'll see how this plays out. I want to get to another very strange City Council-related story, Craig Delamore. WGN reported that Alderman Derek Curtis, he teaches a gun safety class. He was accidentally shot in that class, and then months later, his daughter is accidentally shot. And there's some reason to believe Curtis discharged the weapon that accidentally shot his daughter, although he denies it and says it was his son. Is there a legal issue here, or just one of those head-scratching Chicago stories?
I think in many ways it's a head-scratching Chicago story, but you have to wonder how something like this could happen twice. In fact, some of the reporters in the press room yesterday were talking about the fact that when we first saw those headlines, we go, oh, are they reporting an old story? Because, yeah, we just read this story, and then it's like, well, wait a minute.
Lightning, let alone guns in a concealed carry class, are not supposed to shoot twice.
Yes, right. and I think that, I think the serious issue is that he should not be teaching, a gun safety class.
It does seem like that's a logical conclusion to draw from this.
It does, but I think it is more of an embarrassment, and in any other circumstance, this would be a really big lawsuit. So, presumably he gets along well with his daughter because
he used to.
Yeah.
And apparently she's in good condition. We should know she was taken to the hospital. She's okay.
But she would have a case. I mean, he was acting in his capacity.
Will this hurt his ability?
Re-election chances? I don't know, Ray Long. What do you think? I asked the questions here.
Could he say he's a straight shooter? I don't know.
Oh, that's turning a negative into a positive. That's that David Axelrod strategy. All right, let's move on to that busy lame duck session in Springfield this week. Major and controversial bills get passed. Illinois lawmakers pass an assault weapons ban, which the governor signs. That assures that the new law will pass they assure that the new law passes constitutional muster. An abortion bill is also passed and signed, and that provides protections for out-of-state providers, among many other things. So, Amanda, let's get to that assault weapons bill. First of all, just give us the bullet points. What guns are going to be illegal? Oh, I did not mean. I honestly didn't mean to do that. So what guns are going to be illegal? When will they be illegal? And what about folks that currently own those guns?
So the folks who currently own these guns are allowed to keep them. They are, however, expected to register them with the state. This is a point of major consternation, however, because gun owners say, I don't want to do it. And we already have a growing number of sheriffs from across counties in Illinois saying that they will not, in fact, enforce that. Then you have any of the what had been future sales, except for, oh wait, it's from the time immediately the gun was signed, the measure was signed into law on Tuesday night. So going forward, any of these firearms that are classified in the legislation as assault weapons are no longer to be sold in state. They can be manufactured in Illinois and sold across state lines, but they cannot be sold here. And we would take up the whole show listing them. There are literally dozens of these, and then the state police have the ability to add to that because, of course, technology changes.
And I want to get to that piece about the current gun owners registering their assault weapons and the sheriff saying we're not going to enforce that. But Ray Long, it's the Illinois State Police that's going to be responsible for enforcing that, is it not?
Right, and I think that it's really a question here of what happens when people don't do it.
And how do you know?
Right, how do you know? Do you have to go up to the doorstop? You had an interview with Senator Terry Bryant from Southern Illinois who said she wasn't going to register it until she sees how the courts play out. And they've got, what, 300 days to do it?
What about the tweet from Darren Bailey, the recent Republican candidate for governor, who essentially said, pretty much said over my dead body.
Or out of my cold, dead hands. But again, no one is talking about confiscating any weapons.
Well, now, I think, wasn't it the Lake County State's Attorney who actually had the most realistic of the responses, where he said, if we come upon a gun that is used in a crime, if somebody is actively seen using the gun or something like that, then we may use that, that law.
Because let's not forget that the state has red flag laws and the FOID card, and those laws aren't always enforced, as we found out tragically.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, there have been changes, including recent laws that seek to do more to let people know things. Like, you can raise a red flag if you are concerned that somebody is going to hurt another person or themselves and take that to court. And this law, by the way, does something else. It says that if you are one of these people that the courts deem too dangerous to have a gun, even if you have a FOID card, you can have that gun confiscated for up to a year as opposed to 6 months. So really, this legislation does a lot. And it is in effect now, but who knows for how long, because this is most certainly, and in fact already, some court filings have been issued.
That's the open question, and let's hear Governor J.B. Pritzker addressing that.
My reaction, of course, is this is a constitutional bill. The law here that we now have enacted is constitutional. There was a lot of thought that went into it to make sure that it would be. And obviously, things will go through the courts and they'll make their determinations, but I feel very confident.
On the question of whether it's constitutional or not, Greg Hines, the Second Amendment is one of the most confusingly written amendments there is. And doesn't it just kind of come down to how the current Supreme Court is going to interpret this law?
Probably, and even this court has been all over the map. They've issued some rules that would suggest yes, some rules that would suggest no. This is one of those issues, it's like cats and dogs. People are in one camp or the other, and they just can't work it out in the middle. How this is going to do, I don't know. But I think that there's a real chance it could be overturned, but we'll see.
Do you think there'll be a stay on the law, a while it goes through the courts at some point? Or do you think it'll go into effect?
That's a great question, because you could argue that you can't just change things and then change them back, and everybody would be even more confused. So I could see a judge, if they pick the right judge or get the right judge for the pro-gun rights folks, then that judge could put a stay in and we could just wait it out until a decision is made.
At the same time, Amanda, the governor goes on national TV. He gets plaudits from folks like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Now he announces he's going to go to Davos for the Economic Forum in Switzerland.
Are you trying to suggest that he's looking for a higher profile parent?
Is he keeping that door open?
No. I mean, he certainly is keeping that door open. And let's not forget, of course, there's a lot of questions, particularly after this week, about Joe Biden's future campaign
Don't you think J.B.
candidacy.
POTUS has a nice
Yeah,
run to it.
right? I mean, I think regardless of what happens in Illinois, you have certainly this national platform for Pritzker. He signed this right away. He says, in part because it is so important. But by the way, he can also therefore say, day one, my first full day in my second term, look what I accomplished. There we go, in trying to really pack as much in as possible at this early stage. So yes, people are asking those very questions, or at very least noticing all of this, regardless of what happens legally.
And then, of course, there was the abortion bill that he signed, which again is another sort of good shit for him to have if he's a Democrat seeking
national stage, yeah.
on a progressive national stage. Let's go on to some of the legal issues from this week. U.S. Attorney John Lausch is resigning in March after doing an initial probe of the Biden documents. Meanwhile, more wiretaps are released in the ComEd case, which goes to trial in April 2024. Court documents reveal ex-Illinois House Speaker Mike Madigan said his friends, quote, made out like bandits. Former Congressman Luis Gutierrez also allegedly lobbied Madigan for a ComEd board appointment. First, Ray Long, John Lausch, U.S. Attorney for the last 6 years, overseeing these major cases into Madigan and ComEd, and Ed Burke all of a sudden says he's going to step down in March. Did a high-profile private sector job come a-calling or something?
Well, I think if you have a track record like a crime buster that he's portrayed himself as, and in fact has been, I think that you are able to get just about anything you want. And it's interesting because his term was expanded when U.S. Senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth said, let's keep this guy on. Let's keep him on, even though he was appointed by Trump.
Very rare for that to happen.
Yes, and so I think that he has had an impact here. And if you've already got these trials like Madigan and Burke lined up, you could very well figure that the rest of the team can take it from there.
Hey, Greg, oh, go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, he had kind of hinted that his days were numbered anyway, and that he was staying on to make sure that those prosecutions were continuing. So I think that it doesn't come as a surprise, but it does come as, in some ways, a letdown for this area, because he has been very, very friendly with Mayor Lightfoot. In fact, they'd worked together. He got along with the cities, he got along with the states. He's very easygoing and easy accessible. I think he's going to be missed by everyone.
About a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And now he's going to make a pile of money, which is always nice.
As every former U.S. attorney has. I mean, they've all got lucrative jobs in the private sector afterward. Greg Hines, among Lausch's last duties, will have been to look over these Biden classified documents that were found in his home and then at his governmental center in Penn. The fact that Lausch is saying that he thinks that there needs to be a special counsel to overlook this, does it suggest there might be more here than, whoops, we didn't know we had these documents?
It could be. This case continues to grow. There appears to be another revelation or two every few days, so we don't know what else there is to come out. It also might suggest, so there's a question of public perception. There's already a special counsel appointed to look at Donald Trump for mishandling documents. Here you have a Democratic president who clearly mishandled classified documents. It's kind of hard to explain to the public why you go after the one but not the other.
Right, so it might be a perception and a fairness thing,
Yes.
and we'll see where these
He
investigations...
didn't say anything, so we don't know.
Right.
Speaking of investigations and where they go, these recordings that were dumped this week in the ComEd case, Ray Long, you've written the book on Mike Madigan. You followed this, literally. So in these recordings, Mike Madigan says, quote, his associates made out like bandits for getting these jobs where they didn't really have to work at ComEd. That's kind of making the prosecutor's case for them, isn't it?
Well, it certainly helps to have a big, juicy quote sitting out there. We all remember Rod Blagojevich with effing golden, et cetera. But these really have kind of opened up the curtains as to where the prosecutors want to go in the case involving not Madigan, but rather Mike McLean, his longtime confidant, buddy, et cetera, who goes back with him till the 70s. Ann Pramaggiore, the former CEO of ComEd, and a couple of ComEd lobbyists. So this goes in depth into many, many points that they plan to bring up. And the defense basically is saying, hey, we are not disagreeing that we did this, but we don't think it's illegal.
Illegal. And so we remind our viewers, when Madigan says they, quote, made out like bandits, why that kind of plays into exactly what he's charged with doing.
Well, he is charged with running a situation where he was trying to leverage ComEd's wishes into a whole situation where they were getting his buddies onto the payroll at ComEd in exchange for favorable treatment to
Pay for play,
the utility. In fact, they mentioned pay for play once in this last round of court filings, and I think that that's what they're going to try to convince the jurors to do. Consider that pay for play. You may not like it, is the defense, but this is what it is.
Meanwhile, we're not going to be able to hear all this for more than another year because his trial won't start until April of 2024. But as you mentioned, we have all these other cases with ComEd and some of Madigan's associates that are about to get underway. Greg Hines, I want to talk about this has been such a long week. I can't believe this happened this week, but this new animation released of showing renovations of Soldier Field to try and keep the Bears in town. Seems like not only a Hail Mary, but a Hail Mary from your own goal line with no seconds left on the clock.
I won't disagree, but there's one key question here that has yet to be answered, and that is, to build in Arlington Heights, the McCaskey family, the House of McCaskey, is going to have to do something they've never done.
Did you just say the House of McCaskey?
The House
Oh, the
of
House
McCaskey.
of McCaskey. Like,
They're going to have to do one of two things that they've never done. Take out a huge ton of debt or sell part of the team to somebody else, because they don't have the money to do this.
you don't think investors are going to line up and say, we want in on this too?
Maybe, but does that mean do they get an equity share? If that problem gets solved, I think they've given every indication they want to go to Arlington Heights. But we don't know, and so in the meantime, here's Mr. Dunn, who's doing this, not only to help Soldier Field, but also help his proposed One Central development, which is kind of needs the Bears there to be
Which he's
growing
asking
deal.
the state for nearly $5 billion in assistance for.
Money secured from the state.
Right, and he's clearly trying to get the mayor on his side and everything else, but you know, I wouldn't disagree with the Hail Mary characterization.
Craig Dellamore, do you think the Bears are as good as gone and they're going to have to find some other use for Soldier Field?
I think that is probably the case. The only hope that Mayor Lightfoot and the rest of the city have is that something will go wrong in Arlington Heights or maybe in Springfield, where some lawmakers are trying to make sure that they don't get any state money for this project. So that's their only hope, and they are just trying to make sure that if the Bears have to come back, that there's a soft landing for them, that they might, you know,
They at least have to
accept.
go through the motions of making every attempt.
Well, and making things more complicated, Amanda, in Springfield, I think it's Cam Buckner running for mayor, state representative, who's sponsoring a bill saying no public subsidies
That's
for
not
anything.
only sponsoring, it's law.
Yeah,
It is
it's
law.
Passed.
part
It
of
passed.
the-
It did pass.
It's passed as part of something else, yeah.
And not sponsored
So can the
necessarily
Bears
by
get
Buckner,
around that?
but so this would be, I mean, this involves state funding, so I believe they could secure other public
what it
funding.
specifically does is it cuts off direct subsidies, but it doesn't cut off infrastructure help. If the state wanted to build a road or something,
Which is what the Bears
a
have said
different
they've
kind of
been
grant.
asking for in the
Right.
first place.
So we'll see. It limits it, but it doesn't eliminate it.
So some positive press, though, saying, hey, I said no state funding for the Bears to move to Arlington Heights. Speaking of the Bears, Greg Hines, they hired a new president and CEO, Kevin Warren, who came from the Big Ten. He was the commissioner. What does that tell you about the direction their business is headed?
It tells you that they've hired a major leaguer here, literally. This guy did wonderful things for the Big Ten. He expanded to the West Coast. He signed one of the most lucrative TV packs ever for college sports. The Bears clearly need to reinvent themselves, and this is the kind of heavy hitter who maybe can help them do that.
Craig Dellamore, Mayor Lightfoot, said that she and Kevin Warren are friends. Does that mean that maybe she's got some sway with him to keep him here in Chicago?
I don't think that's going to make any difference. Maybe when she wants to upgrade her season tickets again, though, maybe that
Getting
will.
the call returned, that's evidently been an issue.
Yeah, that'll help. That'll help.
That's right. She has season tickets up in the third deck or something like that, and
Yeah.
she was trying to move down for security reasons, wasn't it?
That's what they said, yes.
I think that was in the Tribune. All right, well, we are out of time, and our thanks to Craig Dellamore, Greg Hines, Ray Long, and Amanda Vinicki. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Weekend Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then immediately after that for Chicago Tonight Black Voices at 6:30. Then we're headed back to 7 o'clock next week. And now for the Weekend Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great holiday weekend. Amanda, we didn't really get into the abortion bill and the gender-affirming care bill, so run down the finer points of that for us.
So it does just that. Illinois has been talking about itself as a safe haven, and this allows for patients to come here as well as for providers to be able to perform abortions in state without fear of basically prosecution when they return home, because they won't be extradited. There is also additional protections in terms of what at least municipal governments must cover in terms of insurance. So abortions have to be in there, as is coverage for HIV prevention drugs, coverage for gender-affirming care and therapies. That's a big one. There are protections for those who go for IVF. It really does run the gamut.
Gender-affirming care therapy, so folks that are undergoing sex reassignment or something like that.
And so it's just the drug therapies. There'd been some effort to go beyond that. This is really just providing the care for, providing the security that, again, public entities need to have that sort of coverage as part of their insurance program.
All right, Ray Long, another question I forgot to ask you about. Luis Gutierrez, the former congressman, asked Madigan for a job on ComEd's board.
To get somebody else a job.
Oh, to get someone else a job.
You threw me for a second there, but yeah,
it's
the reality.
Chicago,
yeah,
Ray.
right.
Anything's possible.
It's possible that is in the next round of filings too.
So.
But yeah, Gutierrez endorsed Madigan in 2016, 2018, and then his buddy Juan Ochoa thought that he needed a little more time and effort, and he thought Gutierrez could get a favor out of Madigan, and that's allegedly what happened.
Everyone trying to get favors. So what are you looking for in the trials that are about to get underway?
I think it's going to be a real curtain raiser onto what
Is
they've
anyone
got
going
on
to plead
Madigan.
out?
Well,
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.